Hello Art One, and welcome to our first unit on distant learning. We're going to keep moving along on our art forms textbook, and we're going to start in chapter 21 in edition 10 and 11, and we're going to be working with early 20th century art. So that's the 1900s. And we're going to kind of keep going on down the road of like time and how art kind of progresses with the history and so on and so forth. So as you did your readings and your questions, you read a little bit about how Cezanne inspired Picasso and Georges Baroque on their Cubist movement. And we're going to make art that's kind of inspired by the Cubist movement as well. So you can see here we have Paul Cezanne, which is an Impressionist painter. And then we have a Georges Baroque. And you can see right here, he painted this in 1809 versus Cezanne was 1886 was this painting. You can see how they took two landscapes and how Georges Baroque kind of went a little bit further, and he really broke down the landscape more into these cube or geometric shapes, right? And then we have here's another piece by him called The Portuguese, where it's a newspaper. You can kind of see he's breaking down the face of the newspaper into shapes and forms. And then we have Picasso, the violin, fruit, and wine glass, still life. So this is really taking something that we might have seen in real life, not thinking of it as realistic at all, but breaking it down to the most simplest forms and shapes. And this becomes, at times, more flat. So I found a couple objects for my home, and I recommend going outside because it's a beautiful sunny day if you can, and finding a couple objects in your everyday, either inside or outside. I'm going to show you a picture. I took a picture of my object here. So I took a tissue box and I took a salt shaker. I liked them for their geometric shape forms. I took a picture of that. And I drew a very simple starting point for my Cubist-inspired still life. So first thing is I drew, you can do this using a grid, or you can just use, you just eyeball it, free draw. I took the still life and I broke it down into the most simplest shape and form, making the squares into cubes still. You can kind of see the simple shape of the tissue and the salt in the shaker. And then from there, I took those two objects again, and I enlarged them. So you can see the salt shaker here. I enlarged it and made it bigger, overlapping it on the form that it was originally drawn of the salt shaker. And then I took the tissue box, enlarged it, and enlarged it again. And here I took a bigger enlarged part of the tissue. We're kind of taking what we see in our still life and enlarging and making it smaller and placing it in different spaces to fill up the whole frame. Much like the Cubists, they fill up the whole frame, and you're getting the essence of this subject, not so worried about the realistic qualities of it, right? But thinking about how it plays in the space and how you can kind of extend it and play with those simple geometric shapes or organic shapes if you pick something from outside that is nature-based. And then as I am drawing, I'm thinking about certain lines I don't need, or certain aesthetics, right? Things that I think are pleasing or not pleasing in this drawing. So maybe see how this is overlapping here? Maybe I don't want it to overlap, so I'll just erase those lines there so it looks like it's going behind. I'm not worried about erasing anything in my still life to begin with, but I make these aesthetic choices later. For example, I want to make this the flat square. So instead of making it look more 3D, now it looks like there's a square flat shape there. And I'm going to clean up this shape here. So I'm just kind of picking and choosing. Not really too planned with this, right? I kind of want to have it very loose and easy to begin with, just layering and overlapping enlarged still lifes that I redraw over and over again of the same object. Kind of emphasizing that zooming in and zooming out effect if we had a camera and we're taking a picture. So I take away some of those lines just to kind of make it more about the shapes and not so much the overlapping. The overlapping will happen later when we do the coloring. So I drew it 3 times in 3 different stages. So here's my final outcome. You can kind of see here's the box and it's growing bigger, bigger, and bigger, and then it gets smaller and goes back. So there's like the sense of movement in the space. I have it big back here. I have the top growing and getting smaller, and there's this overlapping sense of flat space, but also some kind of strange vertical, like not vertical, excuse me, like layered space depth going on at the same time. I erase certain things out of the still life to make it more interesting for me visually. I'm going to go back here and I'm going to erase one more thing. I think I'm going to erase this one right here. I don't need that one. And I think this one right here too. And don't do too many, you know, just don't erase too many lines, but, you know, really push yourself and think about how you're going to enlarge and overlap the same still life on top of itself over and over again in different parts of the picture. So this is my finalized cubist style drawing for the coloring part. The next step to this video is going to be how do we add color. And if you have watercolor palettes or color pencils, you're going to get those out. Those are materials that we're used to. If you don't have any of those things, you can just use a pencil, and I can show you a couple techniques with just adding some value and strong contrast texture to this still life. Stay tuned.